Hi, I'm Jeremy, and today we're going to talk about auction games. One of the most famous auction games ever created is by designer Reiner Knizia. It was named Medici, and this game, it played 3 to 6 players beautifully. It was back in the late 90s, early 2000s, one of the few auction games that you could play that would play, or a few Euro games, I guess, that would play wonderfully with 6. And several years later, Knizia followed that up with another game, Strozzi, and you could see these two games have linking box art, which I always thought was kind of cool. And this was a similar 6-player auction game. And then he followed up with the game that we'll be looking at today, which is Medici versus Strozzi, which is actually only a 2-player only game, whereas those two both play up to 6. And of course the question is, can an auction game work with only 2 players? I'll take a moment to show you the rules and the way that the game plays, and I'll come back and give you my thoughts on that. Okay, so this is what the setup of a game of Medici versus Strozzi might look like at the start of the game. There are going to be these 3 ports that are set between 2 players with markers on the center section of each port. You'll notice that each port could hold either 2 or 3 good types. They'll be accepting those types of goods, and on each port on each good type there is going to be a track which has a center space where these markers will begin, and then those could slide toward these bonus spaces, which will give 10 or 20 points if one player controls the majority in that good type at that port. Players will also each get a set of these ship tokens. There's one that could hold 3 goods, one that could hold 4 goods, and one that could hold 5 goods. And they will also begin with 300 money each. And the way that the game is going to work is going to be relatively simple. Each round, there's going to be 3 rounds. Each turn, a player will be able to draw up to 3 tiles from a bag, one at a time, and determine if they want to draw more. So here we have a gold 5. This is not one of the good tokens. This is a separate sort of token. So it's a 5-value gold tile. They might choose to draw again. Oh, they got another one. And then if they drew a 3rd time, here they've gotten a 4 goods tile. This is a textiles tile. So after they've drawn the 3 tokens, or at any point when they choose to stop drawing tokens, and they cannot draw more tokens than they would be able to fit onto one of their ships, they would then declare them up for auction. So here we have 2 5 gold tiles and a 4 textile tile, and the player who has drawn them will then declare a price. So let's just say that they say that these should cost 50 coins. What happens then is the other player has to determine whether they want to buy it for 50 coins or let the initial player have it for 50 coins. So if this player passes, this player would pay 50 coins. They would have to assign these 3 tiles to a ship, and then assign that ship to a port. So for example, if they did these 3 here, they would want to assign it to a port that accepted textiles, so they might put that there. Now you can only assign 1 ship to each of the 3 ports, and you'll have to assign 1 ship to each of the 3 ports unless you don't win something for one of your ships. And then it would just be the other player's turn, and they would be able to do the same thing. So draw tiles, and then at some point declare an auction. So here they have a 0 tile, which is, this looks like spices, and they could stop immediately after that, and they could say, okay, just the 0 tile, and they might say, 10 gold, and this player says, I don't want that pass. They would take this, assign it to a ship, and then assign that ship to a port, and pay their 10 gold, of course. So then they would get change, and this will just keep going back and forth. So again, players are going to keep auctioning off tiles until the various ships are all assigned to ports, and the game round will continue until one of the player has all of their ships filled. Okay, so here I've set up a end of round scoring example, and one thing I should mention is that the round could also end if ever there are no goods tiles left in the bag, which is very possible, especially if a player chooses to buy tiles and then discard them instead of assigning them to one of the ships. You might do that just to keep an opponent from getting some of those tiles if they've bid too low and you didn't really want them, but you didn't want the opponent to have them for a cheap price. Something I should also mention is that although you do have money in here, you can never actually run out of money. If you have no money tokens and you still want to bid higher than the amount you have on an auction, you're allowed to do that. You just record the amount of money which you will have to pay back at the end of the game. So now here is a scoring sample for the end of the first round. And the first thing that you do is that you look at the total value of all the goods on each ship at each port. So here this player has 3 plus 2 plus 3 plus 1, so that's 9, whereas this player has 4, 6, 7, 8. Since this player has more, they would get 20 coins as a bonus. And you'll do that at each port. So here we have 7 versus 14, and that's why these gold tiles are valuable. They don't move these markers here, but they count as 5 each towards getting that 20 coin bonus. So this player handily won that. They would get 20 coins. Here we have 8, 10 versus 4, 8, 11, 12. So this player would get the 20 coins. In the case of a tie, nobody gets the 20 coins. So after that's done, what you're going to do is evaluate the goods markers for each player. And for each goods marker, you'll move this marker 1 towards the player, so you might go 1, 2, 3 for these 3, and for a 0 you will get to move it twice, so it would go to there. And then this one here, this goods type, does not match any of the goods that are shown at this port, so it has no effect. And that might happen when you win a lot of tiles. They might not perfectly align with one of the ports, so you might have to basically send goods to a port where they aren't going to help you on the track. As this player did, they have 2 of these blue good tokens, but there's no blue goods at this port, but they have 2 of these tokens, so they would get to move that way. Each player will get 10 points at the, so this would happen with all 3 ports, and then in each port you would get 10 points for each goods token that you have the majority on, so this would get this player 10 points, and then here this player would get 10 points for having this one over here, plus an additional 20 points for having it all the way into this bonus zone. So that's going to, like I said, happen in each of the 3 ports. Then you'll take all these tiles, put them back into the bag, and begin a new round with the next player being the lead player. So the player who begins the first round is the second player in the second and third rounds. After 3 rounds, whoever has the most money would be the winner. All right, so that is Medici versus Strozzi. Again, this is a 2-player only auction game. It plays in about 30 minutes, and it says ages 10 and up, although I suspect you'll want to play with somebody older than 10 if you want to have a competitive game of this. Although the rules are pretty simple, this is really an exercise in valuation, and I'm not sure how well 10-year-olds will do with that. The interesting thing about the game is that the values of goods is always going to be changing, both on the number of spaces that you have left on your ship, your relative position on a scoring track versus your opponent, how far into the game you are, if you're in round 1, 2, or 3, and so on. And initially, it might just seem very cut and dried. This gold tile could get me the majority here, so it's only going to be worth the 20 points I get for the majority bonus, but you have to, of course, consider what it'd be worth to your opponent and so on. So the game is really just, a giant fluctuating math puzzle, and I understand with certain players that's just not going to be an appealing thing at all. But if you really like, Knizia's other auction games, this is probably a game that you're bound to like. The auction mechanism where one player sets a price and the other player refuses it or accepts it, and then the initial person will be forced to buy if the price was refused, works well enough. Several Knizia auction games have once around mechanisms, and this is not that dissimilar to that. It's just with only 2 players, so it's an either-or situation. So it works surprisingly well, even though it is restricted to 2 players. And the game is somewhat tense, as you're pulling tiles from that bag, the decision of when to stop pulling tiles. And, as your ship spaces decrease, that becomes an increasingly important decision over the course of the game. And what tiles you get within a set as you're pulling tiles will determine where you're going to assign a ship. And if you already assigned a ship to that port, that creates a dilemma, because that becomes an opportunity for your opponent. So there are all these, fluctuating variables going on in this game that keep it interesting, even though it's really just the same thing over and over for 3 rounds. So this is a game that really does work well. It's definitely a game for fans of mathy games. It's definitely a game for fans of auction games. I happen to be somebody who likes that kind of game. I guess it's up to you to determine whether or not you're one of those people. But that is Medici and Strozzi, and those are my thoughts on it. Thanks for watching.